The topic for today, I think, is our last one on the schedule that is a straight science topic. I think that's it for science for us. So we made it. We did medical ethics twice in a row. I think we're sort of concluding our medical ethics adventure of the past 3 days right now with a discussion of some of the more finer points. The more finer, wow, you can tell that I haven't had my coffee. The finer points of DNA, of biotech, and we're also going to talk about designer babies. We'll talk about lab-grown meat. We have a lot of things we're going to do today. I will tell you what DNA is eventually, but let's get to it. I'd like to start with an introduction. That's how most introductions go. And my introduction is this. I believe very firmly, and I guess you can disagree with me if you like, but it's my belief. I believe very firmly that when we try to adapt Torah to match science, we do an incredible disservice to Torah. Torah should not be applied to science. I don't think it should be done. I think it's wrong. I think what we should do is we should recognize that Torah is infinite, recognize that it's the will and the wisdom of God Almighty, that Torah transcends time and space in all places, and that it was created before the world was created, and that when we discover something new, obviously it's in the Torah somewhere, and we work in the other direction. That is, that it's not so much. What a lot of people do with the DNA question or with modern science questions is they approach it in the opposite direction, which I think isn't the way a Jew thinks. The direction they approach it is they will say, the Torah is a very, very old book. How can I apply some of the principles of the Torah to a novel scenario? I don't think that's how Jews do things. What a Jew does is a Jew believes that every novel scenario is hidden in the Torah somewhere, and we just didn't know about it yet. God knew about DNA when he wrote the Torah. And he put it in there somewhere, which means it's not a task of applying a Torah idea to a new concept. It's a task of digging through the Torah to find where God put the DNA in there. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you places going all the way back to the oral Torah, to the written Torah, to the Torah that we received at Har Sinai. Both forms, of course. That is before even the creation of the world. It was written before the creation of the universe, and show you that the newest, most cutting-edge medical discoveries are all in the Torah from the beginning, that we've known since the time that Hashem created the world what he wanted us to do with them, and we're going to see some of the practical legal implications in Jewish law of applying the Torah in that way, in the kosher way. So that's what we're going to do. That's the idea. With that in mind, yeah, did somebody has a, good, bad, medium? Okay. I'm going to start with forensics, with forensic DNA analysis. And although we generally keep these sessions pretty upbeat, I can think of no positive cases of using forensic DNA. If we're using forensic DNA, that means that we are using the remains of a person, their DNA, to try to figure out who they were to declare them dead. It's not a happy scenario. The one I have on my screen is one of the more distant ones, right? I mean, I could have picked any number, unfortunately, at this point, of horrible images. This is one of the great defining tragedies of my lifetime, although honestly, there have been so many lately that I don't know if I even count it anymore it's on the list. I don't mean to minimize it, but my God, we've seen so much tragedy since this one. Mashiach should be here already. Mashiach should come right now. But I remember this one. I'm old enough that I remember this one, although I'm younger than you might want to believe when this happened. I remember it. And the reason why I have it up on the screen is it was a defining moment for America, obviously. I think it was a defining moment for the Western world, probably a defining moment for the world at large. It initiated a war that lasted most of my lifetime. So it was a defining moment for the world at large, but it was in Jewish law a defining moment as well, for a reason that you might not be aware of that I want to discuss with you today. In 9/11, when this happened, there were a bunch of Jews in the building. And a bunch of those Jews died. And a number of those Jews who died, it was very clear that they were dead, either because we found their entire bodies, or because they were at a floor from which you couldn't survive. The picture doesn't really show it very well, but there was a floor at which each airplane hit these buildings, and above that level, a person couldn't survive. There was no way to get down. There was a fiery furnace over here, and you simply couldn't. There was no form of egress. Meaning, if you could prove that somebody was all the way up here, even if you never found their body, because Rahman al-Islam, it burned up and you weren't able to find their remains, even if you never found their body, you could prove they were dead just by putting them in a certain place. Which means that the majority of Jews who, they were attacked in many ways for being Jewish. These Jews who died in this scenario, in a holy way, I think, call them Kadeshim. These Jews who died in this horrible scenario, generally speaking, we were able to confirm they were dead, either because we found their bodies or because they were in a place where they could not survive, with the exception of 15 men. 15 men went to work that day, were in the building on a level low enough that they could have survived, and their bodies were never recovered. And because of that, we had a Jewish legal problem that is very, very serious. Their wives, I don't think, wanted to remarry immediately, but would like to eventually move on with their lives. In order for someone to get out of a marriage, there are only two ways out: death or divorce. if we can't find the bodies of the husband, we can't confirm that the husband ever died. And if we can't confirm he died and he's not around to hand a divorce document, that means that this woman, these 15 women, could have ended up stuck in marriages forever, unable to ever remarry, and also without their husbands, unless we could confirm these men were dead. We didn't have their bodies. We couldn't prove it. This is one of the oldest Jewish problems. It's called aguna. You might have heard of aguna before, the chained woman. This is a classic problem. Rabbis have dedicated, honestly, the majority of their resources and the majority of their time throughout the ages to solving aguna problems. When men suddenly disappear, unfortunately, very frequently because non-Jews have attacked us and destroyed us so thoroughly in certain areas that we never find the remains of the men we're looking for. But in other cases, because of simple malfeasance, a man will skip town pretending, faking his own death, and you got to track him down. So throughout history, rabbis have dedicated a good deal of their time to determining whether men are in fact dead so that women can remarry, and that's called agunas. I believe that the Sydney Beis Din is somewhat involved in that, maybe even very involved in that in the world at large, correct? That's something that's done down here? Yes, it's considered the apex of rabbinic thought. The real leaders, the greatest rabbis of the generation are traditionally in charge of this role. With 15 Jews unaccounted for, it fell to the Beit Din of America to try to figure out whether they could confirm they weren't alive anymore. And they started with some simple detective work, and the detective work was incredible. Was anybody here in the United States or in New York immediately after 9/11? I was. Was anybody? You were. So you might remember if you were there, maybe you've heard from people who were there, it was this very rare time of New York not hating each other. I mean, it was the only time you can ever be in New York and nobody wants to hurt you. I mean, nobody wants to hurt you in New York, but there's like a rule that you frown at everybody, and there's a rule that you don't look up when you're on the subway. This was suspended for like 2 days in New York City after 9/11. There were like 2 days of New York City-wide unity among all people. And I remember it, and people tell me who were there. I mean, this isn't just my experience. This was known that for a couple days in New York, we were nice to each other. We went right back to normal right afterwards, us New Yorkers. But for a very brief period of time, we were all nice to each other, which meant you could ask favors. And the Beit Din of America reached out to the NYPD, the New York Police Department. I realize I'm in Australia. You don't necessarily have to know what the NYPD is. The New York Police Department and a bunch of other governmental organizations, and said to them, can we have stuff that normally is illegal to get? Can we get the records of who swiped their Metro cards into the subway at Wall Street Station? Can we get records of who checked into the building? Can we get records of who dialed the phone numbers? Can we get records of who entered their unique codes into the elevators? And because it was in the days following 9/11, we got that. The Beit Din of America was able to get a whole bunch of information on where individuals were on that day. And because of that, they were able to take the majority of these 15 men and establish that they were indeed in a part of the building that was unsurvivable and declare them dead. Using a general principle in the Gemara, actually either known as Maim Sheyesh Lem Seif or Kivshana Eish, 2 cases mentioned in the Talmud of losing somebody so thoroughly that we know they couldn't have survived. Just to tell you what those cases are. The Maim Sheyesh Lem Seif case is that we have a swimming pool in front of us. That's Maim Sheyesh Lem Seif. I can see all the borders. There's no way you can sneak out of the pool. I see somebody go in and I stare at the pool for 3 days and no one comes out. I'm exaggerating, 3 days. We know for sure no one can hold their breath that long. We know for sure there's no underground tunnel. We know for sure there's no way out. Even if we never find their body, we can declare them dead. That's Maim Sheyesh Lem Seif. The other case is Kivshana Eish. If someone falls into a furnace and we can see all ends of the furnace and we see that they don't emerge, even if we never find their body, we can declare them dead because there are certain situations that are unsurvivable. So they were able to take the majority of these men and put them in truly unsurvivable situations and therefore declare them dead, and their wives were able to, after they have had a sufficient time to mourn and sufficient time to come to terms with what was happening, move on with their lives. The majority of cases were solved by that. However, there were still a few cases that were unsolved. And the reason why was that we couldn't, using normal detective work, put them in the building. We couldn't confirm they were there. And so these women, I think 3 or 4 women, were destined to have to live the rest of their lives alone, have to live the rest of their lives unmarried. Because if you can't confirm the husband's dead, then you can't confirm that you're not still married, and in that case, the woman's stuck. And that's a terrible tragedy, a terrible tragedy. There was, however, one more thing we could try. The good news, which is bad news, but good news in this context, is that the United States had declared those 4 or 5 men dead. Why had they declared those men dead? Because they had found bones that you can't live without, like a skull, and used DNA evidence to suggest that that bone, that skull, belonged to this person we were looking for. Meaning, as far as America was concerned, we had perfectly good evidence that these men were not alive anymore. We found bones they can't live without, did a DNA testing of those bones, a genetic testing to determine that this bone indeed belongs to this missing person, and therefore this missing person's clearly dead. You can't live without your skull. Some people live without their heads, but not without their skulls. It's the only joke I can come up with in a morbid discussion of skulls after 9/11. That's the best I've got.
It's not bad.
Not so bad, right? Not so, I mean, it's bad, but not, it's the best I've got. Don't worry, the next topic's funnier. This one is, this one's a little more serious. And for the first time in Jewish history, the question was brought to the fore. And it really mattered. It really mattered for real people's lives. Do we accept DNA evidence as Jewish legal evidence that somebody really was somewhere and that somebody's not alive anymore? Is DNA good enough? And you would think what you would have to do is go back into our primary texts and try to twist the Torah until you could say, well, maybe this is kind of describing DNA, and sort of apologize for our text. But of course, that's not what our holy rabbis did. Our holy rabbis went looking for DNA in the Gemara, went looking for DNA in the Talmud, went looking for DNA in the code of Jewish law, because it has to be there. God wouldn't give me DNA and not give me a code book for how to use DNA. Before I tell you what we did, though, I need to give you a little bit of background. And do we have anybody in biology or in biotech or chemistry as a field? Nobody? Then none of you understand that this is a fantastic joke. That opening line is a killer. DNA testing a primer is objectively funny because the way we test DNA is with something called a primer. So it's funny. It's funny. The fact that I had to explain it ruins it, and I'm mad at all of you. But this is quality content. Only here at Yarchei, Kallah, in Melbourne. Up on the top of the screen, I have the central dogma of biology. It's called the central dogma. That's how important it is to us. I will note, as somebody who's worked in science my entire career and also watched its developments, just because something is a central dogma doesn't mean we won't one day overturn it and call it silly and passé. Science is like that. It changes all the time. It's one of my favorite parts about it. But as far as I've been alive, as long as I've been alive, and it doesn't seem this is going anywhere, we have a central dogma. The central dogma works like this. Everybody has inside them. The rabbi said, we don't all know what DNA is, so I'm going to tell you right now what DNA is. First of all, that's DNA. That's squiggly right there. At my university, where I work, we did not discover DNA. We were the ones who discovered that it does something. So I think that's probably more important. Avery McLeod and McCarthy, who discovered that DNA carries all genetic material for everything, except for, retroviruses. That most genetic material for most things was discovered at Rockefeller. So we have a connection to DNA. DNA right there, in this sequence over here, holds all of the code for what makes us what we are, physically, and Gashmias. All of Gashmias is made, all biological Gashmias is made out of that basic genetic code. And the way that it works is that all of the genes a person has that decide what they're going to look like, and also what sort of diseases, Rahman al-Islam, they'll have, and also what sort of immunities they'll have, and what shape they'll take, every detail of our physicality is coded in that and can be read. It's not a faith article. We can read it. We could open up someone's DNA and tell you exactly what they're going to look like and exactly what diseases they will be susceptible to. It's not a guess. We absolutely can read this now. We learned how to read it. That was the Human Genome Project, et cetera, et cetera. So we can read this. The body can read it too. The body takes this genetic code and converts it into RNA, which is ribonucleic acid, a single-string version of that, and then turns that into proteins. And proteins make us. And that's how people are made. Obviously, God runs all of this, right? But this is how he does it. God does it by putting the information for the next person into our DNA. This is a very well-established area of science now. What's cool about it was entirely unknown prior to the 90s, pretty much. I don't mean we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how to use it. It was around the 90s we figured out for the first time how to actually read and use this stuff, which is incredible how recent all of this is. It's really very new science. We are not very unique, genetically speaking. We really aren't. As a matter of fact, objectively, we're not very unique even by face. We think we have unique faces because one of the things that makes us different than all the other animals, all the animals that exist, there's a lot that separates us from animals, but one of the things neurologically that separates us from animals, there are two parts of our brains that are very different from even very advanced animal brains. This has nothing to do with our talk. Fun fact, I felt like talking about science. Two things that make our brains very different. Number one, we obviously have way superior language centers, which of course the Torah tells us. We're medaber, we're the ones who talk. Other animals can talk. There are animals, there are birds that can communicate. But the thing that's cool about our brain is just how well it communicates. Nothing communicates at our level. Our language processing centers are way larger and way more active than anything else that Hashem made. That's special. Another thing that makes us special, though, is our facial recognition centers. We notice patterns better than anything else that Hashem made, which means that to our brains, our faces all look different. But do we have any artists in the room? Anybody who does portraits? They'll tell you, anybody who does portraits will tell you, we don't actually have very different faces. Pretty much all of us have two eyes in the same place. Pretty much all of us have noses that, although mine is a good, 2 feet longer than the average person in the room, generally speaking, we're in a margin of a couple millimeters when it comes to nose size and shape. Our lips are all more or less the same thickness and in the same place. If you weren't so good at detecting very minor patterns on people's faces, you would think we all look the same, and indeed most animals probably do think we all look the same except for hair and dress. Faces really don't look that much different. besides the fact that we all look the same, the reason why we all look more or less the same, I know you're looking at me like I'm out of my mind. Think about it. We all have most of our stuff in the same place. We all have 10 fingers. I know that seems intuitive, but it's not intuitive. We are structurally pretty much identical. And that's because we are genetically pretty much identical. All humans from all places and all times, no matter how different you think you look from some non-Jew who looks nothing like you share 99.99% of your DNA with them. In order to make a person this shape that functions in this way, you need basically the same genetic code every time. There are tiny little differences that make you unique. But generally speaking, in the macro way, we're all very, very similar. We're also very similar to everything that's alive, by the way. We don't share most of our DNA with fruits and vegetables, but we do share 60% of our genes with a banana. True, it's true. You share 60% of your genes with a banana. What exactly that means I can discuss with you afterwards, the difference between DNA and genes, but you're not that much not banana. I mean, you're not that much not banana. Certainly not enough to justify eating a banana and not feeling a little awkward about it afterwards. You definitely are more banana than you'd like to think. So we have a lot in common. We have a lot in common, which means genetic testing is a horrible way, in theory, to figure out whether we're really looking at someone, right? I have a skull here. I'm trying to figure out if this is this person's skull. I just told you all DNA is essentially the same. How am I going to tell your DNA from that person's DNA? How am I going to use DNA evidence to figure out a crime or figure out who's not alive anymore? DNA is all the same, isn't it? Well, I said 99.9, right? There are very small regions of everybody's DNA that are quite unique. Did anybody ever tell you that you're 1 in a million? Anybody ever do the math and realize what an insult that is? With 8 billion people in the world, that means there's, 8,000 people who are exactly like you? That's the way 1 in a million works. You're 1 in a million, which means that you are a copy of 8,000 others. Nice, thank you very much. However, you're even more unique than 1 in a million. You are something like 1 in 2 or 3 billion in your STR regions. You have a small part of your DNA called short tandem repeats. There's 13 regions of these that the FBI uses, and those are the ones usually used for forensic analysis across the board. In these small parts of your DNA, usually they're non-coding, which means that they are parts of the DNA that don't turn into RNA and turn into a protein. They're involved. They're very important. If you get rid of them, people are unable to survive without them. They're very important to keeping the body going, but we're still not entirely sure what they do. When I was coming up in science, we used to call this region junk DNA. We now know that it's not junk because you can't live without it, but we're still not sure exactly what all these regions do. It's one of the most active areas of genetic research, what these regions do. One thing about them is 13 of them are incredibly variable, highly variable between two people, to the point that the odds of you and me having the same 13 STR regions is like 1 in 3 billion. Which means you are utterly unique if we look at your STR regions. So what DNA analysis does is it takes a DNA sample from something or someone, whether it's a piece of hair, a skull, a blood sample, and looks for those 13 STR regions and matches them to a person. If it's a match, we can be fairly certain there are only like 2 or 3 people in the entire world who have your exact STR regions. And what are the odds that both of you were at the scene of the crime on that night? Pretty rare, right? So that's how we do DNA testing. Is that good enough for us to declare somebody dead in Jewish law? Is the question that was asked to the Beth Din of America. Anybody know what that's called? Anybody have it? Wiggle your fingers, tell me. Huh? It's called polydactyly. Anybody have it? It's quite common. Most people don't keep it. AI. That's not AI. It's not AI. You know how I know it's not AI? I put that picture on this slide before AI existed. This slide is older than ChatGPT. That's not AI. Yeah, believe it or not, 1 in 1,000 babies are born with this on their finger or on their toe. So the odds that nobody in this room has it or has a child who had it is very slim. You don't have to out yourself, but I'm telling you, this is actually quite common, that a baby is born with, this is a very extreme one. This is not common. It's a whole extra finger. But to have a slight extra digit and a slight on the fingers or on the toes called polydactyly is incredibly common. It's a very common condition. By common, I mean 1 in 1,000 births. I would say that's pretty common, right? If you know 1,000 people, one of them was born with an extra appendage on their finger or on their toe. 1 in 1,000, 1 in 2,000. But quite common. The reason why I have it up on the screen is about to become clear. Jewish law is obsessed with the idea of trying to figure out whether somebody's dead or not. It's a major active area of Jewish law. I already told you why. Unfortunately, figuring out whether someone was alive or dead was very important for freeing women from marriages they would have been chained in indefinitely, so it became a real priority for us. And therefore, we have a very strict set of laws passed down from the oral Torah, given to us at Mount Sinai and codified in the Code of Jewish Law for how to figure out if a sign we see on someone is a good enough sign to determine that it's really them. And I have the rules up on the screen. I don't really have to read them, but I'll show you the basic one. The basic one is if we can find someone's forehead, nose, and cheeks, most of their face, we're allowed to use positive identification. So if the body is intact and we can see the face, we can declare someone dead based on facial recognition. What if we're missing most of their face, or we're missing an ability to do positive facial identification? We have other tools available. We can use what's called a siman muvak b'yeser, a very reliable sign. Anybody who has a very reliable sign, we are allowed to declare them dead based on that sign. Meaning, this is defined by the Masas Binyamin, brought in the Yaltad Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and generally speaking, accepted among poskim around the world. But what we're looking for is a sign on the body that's so rare, you would only see it in 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 2,000 cases. That's the exact language of the Masas Binyamin. So that means that if I find something about a person that is unique to them up to 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 2,000, according to the will and wisdom of God, that's good enough no matter what it is.
Would tattoos count?
It would depend on the tattoo, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It would depend on the tattoo.
I mean, if the...
It would depend on how common that tattoo is.
Like a vulture or not. Or...
Depend on how common the tattoo is, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Holocaust tattoos, which are incredibly specific, one person ever, yeah, that'd be a very good siman. That'd be a very good siman. Now, we have some rules that simanim don't work for. A longer or shorter limb is never considered a good sign, because I'm told that nobody's completely symmetrical. I mean, I think I am. I look symmetrical in the mirror to me. But I'm told that we're not all completely symmetrical. So a slightly longer arm or leg isn't good enough to positively identify a body. Color is not good enough to positively identify a body. If somebody says this person was always very pale, and look, that corpse is very pale, I think you can guess why. Right. So we're not allowed to use color. That one's not considered reliable. And if you have really inadequate signs, even if you collect hundreds of them all together, that's still not good enough. 100 bad signs does not equal one good sign. But if you can get one siman muvak b'yeser on a corpse, according to the will and wisdom of God Almighty, that's good enough. Now, this should be a layup, right? Can we use DNA? Certainly would think so. 1 in 1 billion is the number I cited. 1 in 2 billion or 3 billion for those STR regions. That's an incredibly good sign. So if I find a skull, obviously I can't see the face anymore, but I can do a DNA analysis and link it to this person who I believe died in that building in 9/11. I should be able to say with a lot of confidence that the siman muvak b'yeser, this guy's not alive anymore and his wife can remarry. And as a matter of fact, that is what the majority of rabbis do indeed say. Oh, next slide. Good thinking. I like it. I like it so much it's literally in the next slide. Yes. Most rabbis did say that. And that is indeed what the Beth Din of America ruled. They freed all of these women on those grounds because DNA is much more unique than 1 in 1,000. STR testing is 1 in 1 billion conservatively. So it's fantastic. Definitely good enough. The will and wisdom of God Almighty is that DNA is a good enough sign to free a woman. Fantastic. There were some voices of dissent, and I'd like to show them to you, or at least one of them, the one you mentioned, just to let you know that this is still an area of active Jewish law. I believe that the Beis Din in Sydney works with this in a very serious way, that they're quite involved in DNA and Jewish law, which means the real expertise is not far from your town. I mean, the worldwide expertise happens to be right around here. I mentioned in one of my earlier classes that a lot of the worldwide expertise in Jewish medical law happens to be out of Australia. It happens to be that you live in the place where all the action is for these stories. So definitely ask your local rabbis for more details. One group wanted to say that you can't use DNA because DNA is by definition small and colorless and needs to be stained to be seen, and therefore you can't call it a sign because it's technically invisible. Interesting. It was generally rejected by the Beth Din of America. Another possibility was that since DNA analysis is based on the size and shape of the nucleotides that make up DNA, that would fail the rule that we had earlier that you're not allowed to use a sign that's based on location or based on staining or based on color. Again, this wasn't really accepted. The big issue that I do want to bring up is this last one. How do you know that it's a DNA match? Who tells you? A technician. How do you know the technician's telling the truth? Or better, how do you know the technician's right? Meaning, let's do a crazy one. Let's say that it's 9/11, and we're going through the rubble trying to find remains of people, a horrible job, and we find a skull with a unicorn horn sticking out of the forehead. It's very unique, right? Very unique. Can we agree that that's a siman muvak b'yeser, a very good sign? Now, if this woman comes to us and says, I'm missing my husband, I don't know where he was, I know he was in that building, I can't confirm he's dead, well, any defining characteristics? Yeah, unicorn man. Okay, I think I can make a match. What are the odds, right? Good match, good match. But that's because anybody could look at that skull and identify unicorn man. We're not talking about that here. Here we're talking about a case where one person with a specific kind of expertise can see the DNA connection and you and I can't see it. Does that cast suspicion on the entire process? I don't know. How much do you trust the medical establishment?
What's the sensitivity and specificity of DNA testing?
It's getting better, but take a look at this. This is called the Georgia rape trial. It's called that because it was a rape trial from Georgia. Took place in 2002. This gentleman on the screen here looks so happy and go lucky right now, was accused of raping people, which is bad, very, very bad. He was sent to jail for, I forget, I wrote down, let me look at my notes so I can tell you exactly how long he was sent away for. I want to give you the details of this story. It's a wild story. You can look it up. He was sent away for 20 years, and he'd already served 17 years of his 20-year sentence. His name was, I think is, Kerry Robinson. This gentleman, Kerry Robinson, was accused of rape, although he claims that he was never there. And nobody can say that he was there. There were no witnesses that he was ever there, and he had good alibis showing that he wasn't there. So how did he get convicted? Perfect DNA match, a perfect match, all 13 STR regions. Wow. And when they presented that to the jury said, you might have an alibi, but the alibi is lying. You might say you weren't there. The guy had like tickets showing he wasn't there from being somewhere else. No good, DNA. And they threw him and they locked him up for 17 years out of his 20-year sentence. There's a group in Philadelphia known as the Innocence Project in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Innocence Project reopens old cases that might not have been done properly and just double checks to make sure they were done right. And they have been going through old DNA evidence files and just having them rechecked. They took the DNA sample, which was still on file, and sent it to, I wrote it down here, 17 technicians and asked each one, do you think these two things are a match? Kerry Robinson's DNA and the DNA found on the scene. Each one of these technicians had 9 years of experience. 12 said no match. 4 said inconclusive, and 1 said match. They presented this evidence to the court and they let him go. He had a lot of really good evidence he wasn't there, and the majority of technicians couldn't see a match in the DNA. What does that tell you about the reliability of a DNA technician? Not much, right? Now, I don't think they get it wrong most of the time. I also think it's getting better. Also, as far as I know, we're starting to use AI in it, which might make it worse, but probably will make it better. This isn't reason to rule out using DNA in Jewish law. It's reason to be cautious, because although we can all agree,
It was also Georgia.
It was also Georgia, yes. Oh, you mean think in Georgia they didn't do a very good job?
No, well, you know Georgia.
I do know Georgia. This is not reason to rule out using DNA in Jewish law. It's reason to be cautious about using DNA in Jewish law. Because if DNA worked 100% of the time, if the technician was always right, then this is a layup. It's the easiest thing in the world. If it works 100% of the time, it definitely is better than the minimum requirement for Simon Movik BA. The problem is, we do have to look into the technician, double check, and make sure the technician's getting it right. And that's why some rabbis are still uncomfortable with using DNA as an end-all, be-all. You might have heard a discussion back and forth. It happens all the time in Jewish circles, whether we should use DNA to confirm someone's Jewish or not. You might have heard that some of the rabbis in this area are using it as a mitigating factor, as a part of a factor, but not as a final say. And you might have wondered why. DNA is such good evidence. DNA is so precise. How in the world can't we just use it? And the reason why we don't just use it without other evidence is because there's a lot of slight issues with DNA, and one of them is the simple reading. So DNA is great, but it's not perfect. And this is how DNA applies to Jewish law. I want to go on to the next thing.
Why not a Beth Din of technicians?
A Beth Din of technicians. You'd have to train them all in DNA tech.
I mean the technicians themselves.
Have them make the Beis Din?
No,
Which are we doing? Oh.
I'm using Beth Din.
You mean get consensus from multiple technicians? That would be the best way to do it, right? That would be the way to do it. To get to, and also, but you'd have to, I'm not getting into this today, but you'd also have to figure in how much you trust a non-Jew for Jewish court proceedings, which is a question. You'd have to figure out at what degree you can trust them. For example, generally speaking, we trust non-Jewish testimony, but only if they don't know exactly what we're going to do with it. So we need them to know less about the case than a forensic technician usually does. There's much to consider here. There's much to consider here. As long as it's in the realm of forensic technicians who are not Jewish. And one possibility is training some rabbis in forensic DNA analysis, but I don't think it's the kind of thing you can do on the side. No, I just don't think it's the kind of thing you can do on the side. Most of these people have years and years of expertise and do hundreds of these a day in order to be this good at it. I don't know that you want to throw that into somebody's part-time job when there's life on the line. So right now the state of DNA in Jewish law, I think I'll probably take questions at the end if that's okay. Right now the state, although I already violated that rule, I have no self-control. Right now the state of DNA in Jewish law is that we consider it, but it is not a slam dunk. And the reason why it's not a slam dunk is because there are issues. So we use it as part of our discussion, not our entire discussion. That's generally how DNA is used. I want to move on to the next topic, if that's okay. Do you want to ask that question that, yeah?
Just about
please.
the SIP and the people who trying to work out after all those people were killed. they lie. I know they
I should have mentioned that, so I'm glad you brought it up. You know, I'm glad I went for the question. The same basis was used after October 7th, and the same basis is now used, unfortunately, after tragedy and after tragedy. So ever since 9/11, this has become rabbinic precedent. It was used after October 7th to matter several agunas, unfortunately, or fortunately. You understand what I mean?
So there was a lot of cross-checking then?
We don't need nearly as much cross-checking to allow a woman to remarry than we do for other uses of DNA. Because we have a general rule in Jewish law that we'll take pretty weak evidence to say a man's dead.
But what about identifying the body from burial?
That also doesn't really, I mean, it's not that it doesn't matter, but it's not the highest level. When we're trying to figure out who somebody can marry, that has a lot of safeguards around it. We're trying to figure out whether someone's Jewish, that has a lot of Jewish law safeguards around it, and good evidence isn't good enough. When we're trying to say that we know this we have a lot of reason to believe this person's dead. A lot of circumstantial evidence this person's dead, plus DNA, we're going to allow less, there's less burden of proof. So for agunas, it's much easier to use this than it is to use it for example, paternity testing. The Jewish courts the real Jewish courts, meaning the halachic courts in the land of Israel, that answer the Bezdin, the Batei Dinim in the land of Israel, have had a lot of back and forth on whether we can use paternity testing to help to have a child inherit their father, because that's a very serious area of Jewish law, deciding who gets what money. Inheritance has a very high burden of proof attached to it. So whether you can use it for that is much more controversial than whether you can use it for agunas. For agunas, that's a lower burden of proof in general.
But you are saying
We got the questions later.
Rabbi wants questions later. Okay. I'm glad everyone's so interested. Let's do something a little bit lighter if you don't mind. Please write them down so you don't forget your questions. Let's do something a little bit lighter. I want to do gene editing for a little bit. And that is my weightlifter baby. That's my weightlifter baby. Not my baby. I believe it or not, I made these slides a while ago. I think that's Photoshop, not AI. Right, remember Photoshop? Yeah. Right, before AI, we had other ways of doctoring images. So yeah, it's a doctored image, but I actually don't think that's AI either. I made all of these slides, like 4 or 5 years ago. So I think these were before I had easy access to AI images. I really do. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a Photoshop job. Hey, we've always been able to lie. We just can do it a little bit better now. I'm going to vastly oversummarize the most important scientific discovery of my lifetime so far, and it's called CRISPR-Cas9. CRISPR-Cas9 is that, remember I told you that we have all of the information that makes a person and makes any living thing, makes an animal, makes a rat, makes a monkey in DNA? We can now take a pair of molecular scissors, cut out the gene we don't like, whoop, remove it, and put in a new gene in its place, which means we can literally cut and paste genetics and make whatever we want. There's very little we can't do. Really, there's very little we can't do. We're not willing to do any of it because there are laws stopping us, but in theory, there's very little right now with CRISPR we couldn't do. We could change the shape and the size and the color and the identity of just about anything prior to it being born by messing with its DNA. We really could do that. As a matter of fact, there was a doctor in China who claims, although it's an iffy claim, Chinese research there's nothing wrong with Chinese people and nothing wrong with China, I guess, but Chinese biomedical research has a big question mark over it in general. They just don't have the safeguards you have in the rest of the world for good research. But there was a Chinese biomedical researcher who made the claim that he used CRISPR to make 2 babies. He accidentally made 2. He tried to make 1, but while making them, he accidentally developed 2 because that's just the way it happens when you do lab stuff. Mistakes happen, twins. So he made twins by mistake, twin baby girls who were immune to HIV because he went into their DNA and cut out the stuff that HIV latches onto and replaced it with something innocuous and made them HIV immune. That's what he claims. He also went to jail for this and lost his medical license because you're not allowed to do that even in China. And also, I don't know how you would test that ethically. How do you find out if it works? Right. So, how do you find out if someone's immune to HIV? Whew. Okay. So we're able to do this. We're able to gene edit nowadays. And it's not just for making weird designer babies who are either immune to HIV or super strong or can fly or have laser vision. Another possibility is that we can use this to cure disease, and some of it's already happening. This is the most exciting one. Anybody know what disease is depicted up on the screen? Sickle cell anemia. That's right. Sickle cell is one of my favorite anemias. Top 10, without a doubt. One of the best anemias out there. And the reason why I like sickle cell anemia so much is it shows the wisdom of God Almighty in a very clear way. Africans really have a lot of sickle cell anemia. Ethnic Africans. Why would God give them sickle cell anemia? It's real bad. See, blood cells are supposed to be shaped like this. That helps them carry oxygen. That helps oxygen go throughout their entire body. When a blood cell is shaped like a sickle, instead, the oxygen can't latch on as well, and so they're always anemic, which is not good for them. It shortens their lifespan. It shortens their quality of life. Why would God make an entire race of people? Really, it's like a race. At the African continent, this is quite common, and it really isn't common elsewhere. Why would God make an entire race of people with sickle-shaped cells that don't move oxygen well? You know what?
Malaria.
That's right. It also makes them immune to malaria. And that is the most common cause of death in Africa. Right. So as long as they're in Africa, they want sickle cells. Because although it's not great to have anemia, it's really not great to die of malaria. Fun fact about mosquitoes, it is a fact that the animal that kills the most people in the entire world every year is the mosquito. It's the most dangerous animal on the planet. Malaria is a major cause of death, and it's carried by mosquitoes, which means much more dangerous than even the animals you have here. And you have so many murder animals here, including that bird that just goes for the eyes. You have so many murder animals here. A plethora of murder creatures. The mosquitoes got you beat. The mosquito puts the magpie to shame. Yeah, I know it's a magpie. The mosquitoes are very dangerous. So this is fantastic what Hashem did. Problem is, some white people got it in their heads that it'd be a good idea to ship a bunch of these black people to America on slave boats and make them slaves. Not a good idea. And then afterwards to free them. I think a great idea. But now they live in America and they don't have malaria and they do have sickle-shaped cells, and that's no good. So what do you do now to cure them? We don't really want to change the sickle-shaped cells of people living in a place where there's a lot of malaria. But if you're living in a country without malaria, you definitely don't want sickle-shaped cells. What do we do? And by the way, it's not just black people, right? You can have people from other cultures. You can have white people. You can have Asian people. They can get sickle cell anemia. It's just not common. But generally speaking, this is a problem that you mainly have in the African continent. So how do we cure them? With stem cell research, and specifically with CRISPR, what we can now do is that every one of these red blood cells is made by a stem cell. Hematopoietic stem cells is what they're called. I'm telling you. Rabbi asked, what do you like when you're fasting? I said, I just can't say words properly, and maybe I talk faster. So, red blood stem cells. These are the stem cells that make other red blood cells. These stem cells, we can take one of them out of the body. We can use CRISPR to cut out the gene that makes cells sickle-shaped, put in a gene that makes them circular-shaped, take that red blood stem cell and put it back in their body, and it will start producing a new kind of blood cell, which is circle-shaped. And then it will divide, and it will grow, and eventually all of their sickle cells will be replaced with regular cells. That treatment currently exists. It's incredible. So some of these stem cell research things are just incredible. Some of these abilities to edit DNA is already making people's lives better all around the world, and that's fantastic. We also have a cancer treatment that works kind of this way. Huh?
Is there an age limit for putting these?
No, not in theory. Not in theory. Because stem cells keep on working throughout a person's life. A person doesn't have to be a small child for this. No, it's incredible. It's incredible. If you can gene edit a stem cell, you can change a lot. I'll actually show you another case of it over here. So over here I have CAR T. This was actually something that we were working on in the labs that I worked in when I was younger, although it was long before it was called CAR T. This is a cancer therapy that's not on the market yet, but it's in late phase trials and it's looking real good. As far as I know, it's not used yet in the regular general public, but as far as I know, in trials it's looking great. And what CAR T therapy is, a new cancer therapy, you might know that, or if you don't, you're about to find out, cancer cells are what happens when cells do what they're not supposed to do in the body and they just keep on dividing, they make a tumor. And they become real dangerous when a piece breaks off that tumor, metastasizes, and sets up shop somewhere else in the body by running through the blood or the lymph. That's how cancers spread. That's what cancer is. There's a reason why most people don't have cancer. It's because of their immune system. The immune system runs through the body constantly looking for cells that are messing up. If it sees a cell about to mess up, it grabs that cell, tells it, kill yourself, and the cell begins what's called apoptosis and kills itself before it can spread its own problem to other cells. Which means that one of the major causes of cancer is the inability of the body to effectively stop cancer before it starts. It's not the only cause. Even if the immune system is working perfectly, other things can cause cancer. But a major cause of cancer is the fact that the body does not have a good enough immune system to stop it, or, more precisely, cancer cells are very good at hiding from the immune system. They develop not just a mutation that makes them clump, but also a mutation that makes them hide. And then the immune cells can't find them. So what if we take out an immune cell, an immune stem cell, a T cell, a progenitor of a T cell, which is supposed to be going around finding cancer cells. We remove the part of its DNA that is bad at finding cancer cells and replace it with a sensor that is incredibly good at finding cancer cells and stick it back in the body. Now it recreates a whole bunch of T cells and a whole bunch of immune cells that run throughout the entire body, find all the cancer cells and get rid of them. That's a promising immunotherapy, and guess what? Looks like it's working.
But it is, it's available in Australia.
I didn't know it's available. CAR T is available here?
They have it,
Really? Incredible, incredible. I don't think it's out of trials in America yet. I might be wrong.
No, for sure. They're on the market.
Yeah?
For blood tumors.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, then
Solid-
we made it. It's on the market. Everybody get CAR T. CAR T for everybody.
Solid tumors is
Look under your chair and you will find a CAR T you can take home with you. You all get I'm just kidding. God forbid anybody should need it. It was just a joke. So, great. I'm glad it's on the market now. I was involved in the trial work.
about $1 million a dose.
Okay, so we gotta work. Anyway, this is the promise of DNA editing. The question we want to look at is, does the Torah tell us anything about DNA editing? Is it ethical? Are we allowed to do it? What could be some potential problems? So, with that in mind, there are three major bioethical concerns that come up when we're talking about gene editing, at least in the secular world, lahavdil, and I want to run through them and just ask you, or ask as a group, do Jews have a problem with these three major concerns? Major concern number one is that there is an ethical principle among lahavdil, the non-Jews, that we should not be playing God. It's inappropriate to play God. We love playing God. Who here has a baby? Who here has a child? Knai Nahara, fantastic. Says in the Talmud, in Tractate Nida, that there are three partners in making babies. Mami, Tati, and God. If you have a baby, you've already played God. Meaning, getting involved in how God runs his world to better the world, if we're talking therapy, if we're talking medicine, if we're talking making more children, playing God is what we do. So in the basic level here, if we're going to talk about, designer babies where we're giving them like super strength or ability to fly or, have weightlifter baby, maybe that's going too far. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the basic principle of we don't play God is not a Jewish principle. We always play God. As a matter of fact, God made us to play God. We're here to make a dwelling place for God in this world. We're here to be the godly voice to the world at large. Playing God is what we do best. So number one, we're really not concerned with the idea of playing God. There might be other problems, but playing God's not one of them. You have a piece of God inside you, you're expected to play. Play God. Number two, patient autonomy. This is an enormously important value in Western cultures and really not one in Eastern cultures, but an enormously important value in Western cultures. A baby didn't ask to be made super strong baby who weightlifts, right? This baby didn't ask for this. This was done to him. Shouldn't we get his consent before we do something to him? Doesn't he have rights over his own body? That's a major concern among secular bioethicists. Do we believe that people have rights over their own bodies? Not really. Not really. We don't believe any other person is allowed to exert their right on your body, but at the same time, we believe that God decides what we can do with our bodies, not us. Which means that if something's good for us, we should do it, and if something's bad for us, we shouldn't, no matter what we want. So patient autonomy is not an enormous value by Jews. In addition to that, when it comes to baby autonomy, we do not give babies much autonomy at all. 8 days into every baby boy's life, we forcibly remove a piece of his autonomy, and we celebrate and make a suda. It's called a bris milah. So doing surgical procedures on a baby because we believe it's for their general good is something we do all the time. We don't really take baby autonomy into account very much. We also have a principle called zakenes adam shlei b'fanav. The principle of zakenes adam shlei b'fanav means that we have a standing assumption that most people like certain things, and therefore we can safely do those things for a person even without their permission. For example, I don't believe that the rabbi likes money all that much, but I think it's safe to say he probably doesn't hate it. So if I want to sneak into his room and drop a $100 American bill on his pillow, I don't have to worry that maybe he's the one guy allergic to dollar bills who I just, accidentally hurt. We can safely assume he's okay with the $100 bill. That's called zakenes adam shlei b'fanav. I'm allowed to take actions that I can safely assume the average person would want. I think the average person would like to be immune to HIV. I think the average person would like to not have sickle cell anemia. So if we're doing interventions at the genetic level to a baby, we don't have to ask, would the baby like this done to me? All we have to ask is, would the average person like this done? So we're really not too worried about patient autonomy either when it comes to this discussion. Fears of eugenics or designer babies, the slippery slope argument. Could it be that this is forbidden because we might one day use this for nefarious purposes to make a robot army of angry babies? We're not really worried about that either, and it's because of a Tiferes Yisrael you should be aware of. The Tiferes Yisrael makes the claim, and it's brought in a lot of modern rabbinic responsa, that God told us a lot of things that were forbidden. And he didn't tell us a lot of things that are permitted. He gave us a lot of mitzvahs, things we're supposed to do, and a lot of averas, stuff we're not supposed to do. The list of stuff that we can do is very, 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 very small. Meaning God doesn't say you can have a hamburger, you can have a hot dog. You can, but God doesn't say it. Says the Tiferes Yisrael, this is because we have an overarching principle that everything in the world is allowed according to Jewish law unless God said it isn't, which is the opposite of the way some people see the world. It's not that everything defaults to forbidden unless God allows it. It's that everything defaults to allowed unless God forbids it. And because of that principle, the onus is on the rabbi staring at the screen, in this case, to find something forbidden about something. You can't just say that sounds forbidden. So the vague fear of a slippery slope of designer babies, of eugenics, these are not fears that God specifically legislated against, which means that this should be permitted unless we can find a reason to forbid it. Can we find a reason to forbid it? There is one reason to forbid it. In elective procedures, there's reason to forbid it. Elective procedures only. If something's for a medical intervention, if we discover a way to make sure that every baby who's born could never die of cancer or could never get heart disease, it would be automatically ethical as long as it had a good safety profile for us to do that every single time, and as long as it didn't involve certain asurim. I mean, imagine a hypothetical where you can press a button and every baby comes out immune to cancer. We're going to do that as long as it's safe and effective, right? Elective's a little bit different. We have a story in the Gemara. It's in Tractate Brachas on 10a, at the very beginning of the first tractate of the Talmud, the one I told you before most people actually learn. That's the very, very beginning. There's a story of King Hezekiah. Remember Hezekiah from the tunnels? The same one who had that funky story about the 3 things he did that they liked and the 3 things they didn't like. That's mentioned like a line after this story. It's all in one place. It's a Mishnah in Psachim, but it's also mentioned in the Gemara in Mesachos Brachos at the beginning. It's quoted there. King Chizkiyahu decided he wasn't going to have any babies. And the reason why he decided he wasn't going to have any babies, even though babies are an incredible gift and the greatest treasure a person could ever have, is he was a bit of a prophet, and he knew that he was going to have an incredibly evil king descended from him, and he didn't want to create more evil in the world. So he made an executive decision not to procreate. And indeed, he was right. He did have a very wicked king descended from him. His child was Menachem, right? The king Menachem was not a good king. He did tshuva later on, but he wasn't a good king for most of his life. So Chizkiyahu knew what he was talking about. The prophet comes to him and says, Yeshayahu comes to him and says, God has decided you're going to die. And the king goes, why? I didn't do anything. He goes, yeah, you did. You didn't have babies. One of the mitzvahs for every man is to have children. This guy didn't want to do it. It wasn't that he tried and couldn't. He chose not to. Choosing to be a man who doesn't have children is something you deserve to die for. I'm wiping you out and I'm wiping out your line. This is the message from God. And Chizkiyahu says back, but I had good reasons. I knew my baby would be rotten, so I made the executive decision not to have children anymore. And the prophet says this back. The prophet says, why do you involve yourself with the secrets of the Holy One, blessed be He? That which you have been commanded to do, that is to procreate, you're required to perform. That which is acceptable to God, let Him perform. Basically, a Jew's job is to do the mitzvah in front of them and let God work out the potential problems. If I have a mitzvah, overthinking it is forbidden according to Jewish law. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who's depicted over there on the screen, smiling real nicely with the Sefer Torah. He always has the sweetest smile. He's not alive anymore. Great halachic decider of the last generation. He ruled based on this piece of Talmud that changing a baby in a way that doesn't medically benefit the baby counts as overthinking the baby, and therefore would be a violation of Jewish law. So it seems elective genetic editing procedures would be forbidden following this principle, but not, God forbid, following any of the principles of the non-Jewish ethicists. Following our principle that we don't overthink how babies are made. That is, deciding that a baby's going to have blue eyes, and therefore, doing a genetic workup to make sure the baby has blue eyes is not Jewish. But doing a genetic workup to make sure a baby's healthy is incredibly Jewish. So the question is it therapeutic or not? If it's elective, it's probably off the table. If it's therapeutic, it's very much on the table if proven safe and effective. Once again, finding this in primary sources from the Talmud. I know we're almost out of time. Maybe we're even already out of time. I want to do clones for a second, and then we'll end on lab-grown meat. Anybody remember the name of this clone? Dolly. I need to share something personal with you. Maybe it's just me. I'm told that those are 4 cloned sheep. Are you sure? Like, would you know if they weren't? Like, oh, you could tell those are the same 4 sheep. Give me any 4 sheep, I'll believe they're clones. They all look the same to me. So I believe they cloned Dolly, but I must tell you, I can't tell. Hi, Dolly, and Dolly, and Dolly, and Dolly. I wanted to talk about clones for a little bit. And the way I want to talk about clones is sort of backwards and around, just for fun. Let me get to my notes down here. Make sure I didn't miss anything interesting I'd like to tell you. Scrolling down my elective editing section. All right. The way that we make a clone nowadays, there's a few ways to make a clone. Try it at home. Take notes carefully. Let me know how it works. Send me a WhatsApp message. There's a few ways to make a clone. The main way we make a clone is we take an egg cell and we remove all the genetic material from the egg cell, so now it's an empty egg cell with no genes in it. And then we take the genes that we want and we put them directly into the egg cell, and then we stimulate the egg cell and tell it, you've just become impregnated. You've just become fertilized. And since we tell the egg cell it's been fertilized even though it hasn't, it starts dividing with 1 set of genetic material inside it instead of 2. And therefore we're able to make a perfect copy of the thing we had before. The reason why you're not a perfect copy of either of your parents is because your parents both contributed genetic information to make you. If we have an egg cell that has only 1 kind of genetic information in it, and we tell it, you've been fertilized, go, it will begin dividing with only 1 set of genetic information inside it, and you make a perfect clone. That's the classic way to make a clone. There are other ways to do it. Ask Google to find out. If you don't like that way, there's other alternatives. Ask me after the class. That's my favorite way to clone a sheep, and that's the way that's the way they did. I believe that's the way they did Dolly. The question I want to ask today, which is of course the Jewish law question that has incredible significance, is that if we take this clone baby, we then need to grow it somewhere. We can't grow it in a test tube. As we discussed yesterday, it's going to need to implant on the wall of a uterus somewhere, especially if we're dealing with a mammal. So we're going to need to have implantation somewhere, which means someone's going to have to carry this baby clone. And the person carrying this baby clone, in all likelihood, will not have the same genetic information as the clone we're trying to make. So let me just switch this from being a clone discussion to being a much more practical discussion. Can anybody think of, maybe I didn't put it on the screen. Can anybody think of, I put a picture though that's a hint. Can anybody think of a case in regular fertility where this happens all the time? Surrogacy, that's right. This is the same discussion as a surrogacy discussion. Let me define surrogacy. We'll talk through it and then we'll move right on to lab-grown beef, and everybody can go imagining the burger that is made from artificial meat that they will have when the fast ends. The way surrogacy works is that sometimes a woman who would like to become a mother, she has perfectly good genetic material, her eggs work fine, but her uterus doesn't work fine. Either she doesn't have one because it was removed at radical hysterectomy, she had a disease of some kind where they had to remove her uterus, or the baby won't grow well or implant well in her uterus, but her eggs are fine and we have her genetic material intact. The problem is she just can't carry the baby to term. So what we'll do is we will take her husband's sperm cell, we'll take her egg cell, we'll fertilize them in a test tube like we're doing IVF, but instead of implanting this blastocyst, remember that word from yesterday? Instead of planting this blastocyst back in the woman who has a uterus that is not going to carry a baby to term properly for whatever reason, we take it and we put it in a surrogate, a second woman. Depicted over here. There's the tati, there's the mommy, and there's the surrogate. She's carrying a baby that is not genetically hers. She will carry this baby to term, gestate the baby, deliver the baby. Who is the mother?
Good question.
Great question, right? Why does it matter who the mother is? Go ahead.
Are they Jewish?
Are they Jewish? Right. Let's say this is a non-Jew and this is a Jew, which, by the way, is how this almost always happens. For whatever reason, read into what you want. Jewish women do not generally volunteer to be surrogates. And a lot of them are involved in surrogacy. So that's just the way it usually goes, just practically speaking. But which one's the mother? Is the mother somebody who carries and delivers a baby, or is a mother someone responsible for half the genetic material of the baby?
Delivers the baby.
No. And also the mother of the grandmother is the surrogate mother. The first one.
There's a lot of opinions on this side of the room. The men know not to say anything. They're like, whichever one you want. Okay, they deserve one. Who is the father of the baby? Right. So we can all agree who the father is.
In 1987, the day I had my shmuley, was the first surrogate mother.
Really? That's very interesting.
1987.
She's just telling that.
Yom Kippur.
It was 1987, you said? 1987 was the first surrogate baby born, she's telling me. Just interesting. It's more recent than you think. Yeah, more recent than you think that we can do this. Now, as you can imagine, throughout world history, this has never been a question because we were never able to separate genetic material from lady carrying the baby. Obviously, it's ridiculous to look back into our Holy Torah and try to find a source for surrogacy because obviously, until we were able to separate an egg from a womb, which we only figured out how to do like 30, 40 years ago, there couldn't be precedent for this. We are finally stuck. And of course, we're not stuck. Let me tell you a story. That's right. I put these on the screen because I am fasting and I haven't had water, and if I don't put numbers on the screen, I will lose count. I'm so bad at numbers. I was listening to an old lecture I gave on a similar topic to this to remind myself of some of my points, and I listened to myself mess up the numbers like 5 or 6 times while talking. It was hilarious. I'm very bad at numbers, even on a good day. So, Leah and Rachel are pregnant. This is a story in the Torah. Our Leah and Rachel, the one who are our mommies. All of our mommies. The question is whose mommy, right? But somebody's mommy. Leah and Rachel are pregnant. Leah is carrying a baby boy. Rachel is carrying a baby girl. That baby boy that Leah is carrying will one day be named Yosef. Did I say something wrong?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. Hold that thought. I did it. That one I did on purpose. Don't worry. Okay, stay with me, everybody. That mistake was on purpose. Leah is carrying Gamit Yosef. And Rachel is carrying a future Dinah. And Leah gets prophecy. And Leah knows how to do math. There was a prophecy that was known to everybody that there would be only 12 tribes. That 12 boys born of Yaakov would each become a major tribe of the Jewish people. And she did the math. Leah already had 6 boys. Bilhah had 2 boys, Zilpah had 2 boys, and Rachel had 0 boys at that point. Which means that there are 2 more boys that will be born to Yaakov at some point. Only 2 more that are possible. Everybody else is going to have to be a girl according to the prophecy. And Leah finds out by prophecy, according to the Medrash, that she's carrying a boy. Which means that if she has a boy, the best case scenario for her sister Rachel Rachel is that Leah has 7 tribes, Bilhah and Zilpah each have 2, and Rachel has fewer tribes than even a maidservant. And that seems unfair, especially since Rachel was supposed to be the only one who married Yaakov in the first place, and she helped Leah get married in the first place. And Leah realizes the injustice of the situation, that Rachel, who took one for the team, might have fewer tribes than anybody else and might even have 0. And she knows with her prophecy that Rachel's pregnant with a girl. And she knows with her prophecy that she's pregnant with a boy. And the Medrash says that she prayed to God to switch the fetuses. And she said to God, take the fetus that is my genetic material, take my egg cell, which is Yosef, and put it inside Rachel. And we have our first case of surrogacy in the Torah. Rachel gestates and carries Leah's gamete to term and delivers Yosef. Wait, don't worry, don't worry, I'm not done. Don't worry, I'm not done. I'm not done, we're just starting. We're just getting started. Let's pause here for a moment, though, and analyze what happened. Who's the mother? Rachel. If Rachel's not the mother, then what Leah didn't help, right? So Leah's entire magic switching process was in order to establish that who's the mother, the surrogate or the egg donor. The surrogate. If the surrogate's not the mother, then Leah did nothing. This argument is brought in many rabbinic texts to say that the surrogate is the mother, not the egg donor. But wait, there's more. There's a second medrash. Of course there is. There's a second medrash. Second medrash asks a different part of the story. You might know that since Leah delivered the girl, she had baby Dinah. You might know that Dinah had a terrible tragedy happen to her. She was hurt. And after she was hurt, her brothers came in and destroyed an entire village because of it. Something that I mentioned vaguely last night at our Fabrengen, but I never like to go into details on such depressing matters and certainly on such serious matters. If anybody wants to know what the Jewish view is of how we respond to people attacking women in that way, in the 2 cases in Tanakh that we have that happen, we murder everybody in the village who let it happen. That's our view for response to violence in that way. So you want to know how we see this? We see this as justifying the destruction of a village. That's how seriously we take it. So Dinah was hurt. Shimon and Levi come in and kill everybody in the village who was complicit in her being hurt. And then according to the Medrash, they come to Dinah and say it's time to come home. And Dinah says, I'm not coming home. No one's going to want to marry me. Something bad happened to me. Dinah is traumatized. She's traumatized. And she lives in a society at that time that really does value the kinds of things that could justify her trauma. She's nervous and she doesn't want to come home. And Shimon, her brother, says to her, don't worry, I'll marry you. Gross. And she says, yeah, great, I'll marry you too. And the brother and sister Shimon and Dinah get married. And as a matter of fact, Rashi says Shaul ben Aknanis is a child of that marriage who comes down to Egypt. So they have a child together. Now, besides the fact that a brother and sister married each other is objectively gross, I have a follow-up question. Were they allowed to do that? Are brothers and sisters allowed to marry each other? They are not. Now, to be fair, this was before the giving of the Torah. However, is a non-Jew, according to the 7 Noahide laws, allowed to do incest. That happens to be one of the 7 Noahide laws. So even if he wasn't keeping Torah, he couldn't keep it. Noah and his descendants were not allowed to have sibling marriages. So now we're really stuck. What did Shimon do? And the commentaries give a very straightforward answer. That was his half-sister. Half-sisters are allowed for non-Jews and not for Jews. And all the commentaries ask back, half-sister? Shimon's father was Yaakov, and his mother was Leah. Dinah's father was Yaakov, and the mother was Leah. They're full siblings. And the Medrash answers, no, they're not. The baby follows the egg, not the surrogate. That's Rachel's baby in Jewish law, and therefore they are half-siblings, and half-siblings are allowed to marry prior to the giving of the Torah. Which means we have a solid medrash establishing that we follow the surrogate, and a solid medrash establishing we follow the egg, which is a net zero, which means we have to return to the text. Now, I don't have time to do them all with you, but each of these rabbinic responses that analyze this, bring these 2 midrashim, smash them against each other, bring like 4 other different gemaras. It's a lot of fun, a lot of fun. We could do a whole class just on this. It's a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, if you line up all the rabbinic opinions in modern rabbinic responsa, you'll get a very narrow majority, about 60-40. I lined them up once. You got about, of the ones that I'm aware of, it's about 60-40. About 60% of modern rabbis who have analyzed this case say that the baby follows the surrogate. And about 40% say the baby follows the egg. That's essentially 50-50. So what do you do now? I'll tell you what we do in Crown Heights. I don't know what any other Bezdin does. I know what the Crown Heights Bezdin does because I asked. The Crown Heights Bezdin has a rule that if either of these people are not Jewish, when the baby comes out, we do an emergency conversion just in case, in deference to both opinions. So yeah, that's the way it's handled in Crown Heights, an emergency conversion if either of them are not Jewish. Also, I will note before we go any further and before we go to our final topic for today, I know we're probably...
Who do you convert? The surrogate?
Huh?
Who can convert the surrogate?
Not the surrogate, the baby.
They can convert a baby.
Once the baby comes out.
Yeah, bro.
Giyur l'chumra on the baby. The same way you convert an adopted baby. Question for another time. How we do it, we do it.
What about Kahuna?
For another time, unfortunately. What I will say, though, is that it is not at all clear to any rabbis that we allow surrogacy in the first place. I'm speaking theoretically if Jews are involved in surrogacy, and theoretically if a rabbi has overseen and approved surrogacy. I don't know what happens here. I know that they have a much more advanced bezdin in these areas here than I'm used to, so I don't know what they do regarding surrogacy. I know in America, our Bate Dinim don't allow surrogacy, generally speaking. I've never heard of them allowing it in the first place. So it's definitely not one of our fertility options we usually keep on the table, but that's how we would view it in Jewish law. We are definitely done. It's 1:08. I have one more thing I want to show people, but I want to let them go if they want to go. Can we do the thing we did yesterday where we have like a little dismissal and then do a bonus slide? Okay, please, if you are out of time, please feel free to leave. No hard feelings. If you're willing to stay for another 10 minutes, I'll show you the final bonus slide. This will take about 10 minutes. So please, let's give everybody a second to stand up and go if they want to go. I'm here to do one more slide if you want to see a little more action.
What happened if it's a family member as surrogate?
Is that what you asked? I thought you were asking about kahuna, no?
When a mother is a surrogate mother for a child,
Incredibly problematic. It can make mamzerim. Yeah, no, it can make mamzerim. Rav Brian in Crown Heights was asked this shaila. Somebody wrote in saying they had, I think it was a sister, said that this woman's unable to have a baby, and her sister volunteered to be the surrogate. Is that mutter? And thank God they asked, is it allowed, before they did it. And Rav Brian said, oh, that's very kind of her, but no. You absolutely can create, you might be able to create mamzerim that way. It's a machlekes whether you can, but you really don't want to mess with that. No, definitely not a family member. Yeah, definitely not a family member. It's not a good idea. I'm not saying that makes a mamzer. We got to look into it, case by case, of course, but I'm saying that it has concerns that would make us go, ooh, don't do that if you haven't done it already, right? Definitely don't do that if you haven't done it already. Mothers in the room, do not be surrogates unless you have asked your local Orthodox rabbi. Oh wait, should we continue? Let's continue.
yes.
Let's continue. Last thing I want to show you today is lab-grown meat. Bonus activity. It's biotech. A little bit of biotech. Food. It doesn't. I mean, does it look good? Does that look good to you? You want this? You're that hungry? No, I'm not that hungry yet. Ask me at 5 o'clock. But I don't know. 5, 6 o'clock, maybe I'd go for that petri dish meat over there. The way we do lab-grown meat. I will know. That's right. I'm just saying maybe by then I'd want it, you know? By 6 o'clock, maybe I'll be into petri dish meat. I don't know. The way that we make lab-grown meat, it's not the same as these Impossible burgers or these veggie burgers that people have that taste a lot like meat. Lab-grown meat is literally 100% meat. What we do is we take an animal cell. People don't like knowing where their food comes from. I know that there's a few people here who are shachtim. You're used to knowing where your food comes from, but the general public does not. You may have never thought about it, but the thing that your food comes from, what is meat? Meat is muscle tissue. You don't eat bones usually, unless you're from Ashkenaz. You don't crunch on bones, and you don't eat a lot of skin, unless you like the crispy skin on the chicken. Generally speaking, what are you eating? You're eating muscle tissue. That's what we eat. We eat muscle tissue. And certain kinds of muscle tissue make different kinds of cuts of steak, and a specific kind of muscle is considered delicious, and another kind of muscle is considered gross, and that's butchering. It's muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is pretty easy to make in the lab. Muscle tissue is not complicated. It's not a kidney, it's not a nephron, it's not a neuron. You can make muscle tissue. It divides nicely on a scaffold. So you take a piece of muscle tissue from a part of the beef that somebody might want to eat from an animal. You don't even necessarily have to kill the cow. You can scrape a little bit of muscle off of it, take a little injection. Cow goes, ouch, what was that? And suddenly that's the end of slaughterhouses in America. Really, that's the end of slaughtering. No other animal ever has to die again. You take this one cell, you put it on a scaffold. You tell it, grow. It grows a steak, not a cow, a steak. And then you take more of that and grow it elsewhere. You could end up getting rid of, honestly, I think anybody who's not uncomfortable with factory farming doesn't know about factory farming. Whether it's forbidden or permitted is a reasonable discussion. Whether we're comfortable with it is not a reasonable discussion. Right now we don't treat animals properly on a large scale. This would get rid of a good deal of improper treatment of animals. It would also clean up the world in general. A lot of our carbon emissions come from animals, much more than from whatever car you're driving or whatever factories are billowing air. We could probably clean up the planet a good deal by not having so many of these farms having so many animals. It would change an industry, but there's a lot of advantages. Do you have a question?
Yeah, is it from that everyone paid?
We'll talk about it in a minute. That's what we're discussing right now. But in theory, this would solve a lot of societal ills. It would be a good thing, I think, if we could get rid of the current meat industry and replace it with something more ethical. At least I think. I think it'd be better if we could replace it. So in theory, this is very, very promising.
How do you feed it?
I'm so glad you asked. One of my favorite topics. How do you feed it? This gentleman knows that cells need to eat something, right? You know what cells eat? I told some of you this in one of the earlier classes as a teaser for this one. You remember? It's called FBS, fetal bovine serum. You take a bunch of cow fetuses, a bunch of cow babies, grind them up, and feed it to the ethical meat. So, ethical meat as a big quotation mark around it. You have to kill like 1,000 cow babies to make one ethical burger. Ethical. Welcome to the ethics of the non-Jews. This is what non-Jewish ethics look like. I will say that the cow fetuses are not necessarily alive, right? This isn't a human fetus, it's a cow fetus, whatever. Anyway, lab-grown meat. The question I want to ask today is it kosher? Not only is it kosher, what's its status? Is it fleischig or is it milchig? Can I make a lab-grown meat cheeseburger? Do I have to shecht the animal beforehand, or can I take it from a living animal? Is it a problem of, as you asked over there, Menachem, taking a limb from a living animal? What is the status of this lab-grown meat? That's the question we're going to look at today. And once again, we have an enormous problem, a classic problem. There's no way the Talmud accounted for lab-grown meat. There's no way that God in His Holy Torah put lab-grown meat in there. They didn't have this. So what are we going to do? Are we going to twist the Torah till we find an application? Or are we going to, with the faith of a Jew, go back into the Torah until we find where God hid it? We're going to do the faith approach, aren't we? We're going to go right back into the Torah and find where God hid lab-grown meat. Now, the OU in America, the Orthodox Union, they wrote a long... Ben Pekua is a good one, and it is mentioned in some chuvas. We're not going to use it today. Ben Pekua is a good one. A fun sugya too in general. Somebody wanted to make a Ben Pekua farm for people to hunt on. You heard about this? Ben Pekua is the rule that an animal under certain circumstances I'm not getting into right now can have a status where you're allowed to eat it without slaughtering it. That status would be if you slaughter its mother when it's at full term and you pull it out at full term, it now doesn't need to be slaughtered to be eaten. It can be killed anyway, not by slaughter, and it's still kosher. In theory, it's a Mishnah. So there were some people who wanted to make a Ben Pekua hunting ground. Because then you could go hunting, right? It didn't pan out. But meaning I'm not advocating animal cruelty. I'm telling you that this is I appreciate your creative halachic approach. That is a creative way to come at this through the sugya of Ben Pekua. I appreciate the creativity. Please don't hurt animals. Do you guys know? I mentioned to one of you earlier. We had a vegetarian earlier. Is he still here? We talked earlier after my vegetarian class. There is a famous tshuva from the Neder Yehuda that you should be aware of just when it comes to animal cruelty. Somebody wrote to the Neder Yehuda and asked, "Is it okay for a Jew to go hunting?" Now, David HaMelech went hunting, but they say the way David HaMelech used to hunt is that his hunters had blades on the ends of his arrows, and they knew how to do the art of shechting just right, so they could shecht with the arrow, or they trapped them in a net and then shechted them by hand. Right, it's whatever. The point is that we can't hunt to eat nowadays. We don't know how to do that. You have to trap. You could trap to eat, but you can't really hunt to eat. If you shoot an animal, you're going to make a treif almost certainly unless you shoot it in just the right place. There are, believe it or not, some places you could shoot an animal that wouldn't render a treif, but you have to be a pretty good shot. And even then, I don't know that we want to eat that. There's a bunch of reasons why we can't hunt. Somebody wrote to the Neder Yehuda, "Can I hunt for sport? What if I just like it? I don't want to eat the animal. I like murder." And instead of taking it out on a person, I'd like to take it out on an animal. I like killing animals. So Jew writes, "Can I hunt?" Do we have any hunters here? Not after I said that, right? You're like, well, now that you've characterized it that way.
Is fishing hunting?
Honestly, it's the same question about fishing, right? Am I allowed to hurt an animal for my joy? I'm going to tell you both answers he gives. Ready? Answer number 1. You are allowed to hurt an animal for your joy. Right. Rav, he says, Tzar Balechayim, cruelty to animals, does not count if there is human benefit. And by the way, he can back it up. That's true. It does not violate the prohibition of Tzar Balechayim if you're having a good time, which means if you enjoy skinning cats, go for it. I didn't mean that. Wait a minute. Wait till the second half of the tshuva. He says, I can't tell you it violates the prohibition of Tzar Balechayim. It violates a different prohibition. It's forbidden, but not for that reason. He says, somebody who gets used to hurting animals for their own benefit weakens their very soul, rips apart what makes them human and what makes them Jewish, and makes it not worthwhile that they were here in the first place. So he says, yeah, you can do it if you don't care about your soul. And his exact words are, Jews don't hunt. So he doesn't say it's forbidden, he says it's permitted and a Jew wouldn't do it. That's quite, so it's a famous responsa for a reason. It packs a real punch on both ends. The answer to fishing is going to, in my opinion, be quite similar. If a person wants to eat what they catch, absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with eating what you catch or trapping an animal and then shechting it and eating it. You absolutely are allowed to hunt to eat. Fishing for sport where your intent is no matter what you catch should definitely release just because it gives you joy. I go right back to the Rabbi Yehuda. Getting joy from that is not healthy. Now, what my friends do who like fishing is instead they'll say, look, I catch and release if it's too small, but if I get what I really want that's a good fish, then I'm going to take that home and cook it. That's entirely ethical. That's the way to do it. So if you'd like to fish as a Jew according to Rabbi Yehuda, and according to at least the way that I paskin on this issue, I would say the ethical way for a Jew to fish is with intent that if they caught the right thing, they would eat it. And if you catch the wrong thing, feel free to catch and release. Okay.
Jews don't do sport fishing.
Jews don't do sport fishing without intent that if they caught something good enough, they'd keep it. No, you're allowed to keep some of these things, right? So if you are fishing with the intent that, if I happen to catch a salmon that's coming home with me and making locks, then I don't care how else you're fishing because you're fishing for intent, right? But yeah, if you really are just there to torture an animal, then that's not very Jewish. Yes?
Marlin fishing, for example.
The way that I would get around it if somebody really wants to is I would say, look, you don't always catch what you're looking for. Make sure that you have a stated intent and really will. If you catch something kosher that's edible, keep it. Okay, anyway, side discussion, but worth having. There are rabbis who are much more lenient on this than I am. I'm referring to the Rabbi Yehuda's tshuva, and this is also out of Bren Paskins and Crown Heights, and I agree with him. So I'm part of a school of thought on this. Your local rabbis very likely feel differently, so please feel free to find a more lenient opinion on fishing. There certainly are plenty. On hunting, there really aren't very more lenient opinions. We're not big fans of hunting for sport. Okay, so I forget how we got into this. Does anybody remember how we got here? No idea. Tar Balechai, right, Ben Vakua, creativity, that's how we got. This is your fault. So, what have you done? So we're trying to figure out, is this fleshig? Can I eat this with dairy? Does it have to be shechted first? What's the status of this lab-grown meat? And when the OU was faced with this question, they wrote a long essay on this that anybody can read. I believe they published it in English first and Hebrew second. So I think you can even read it in English online. They have a fascinating discovery, a fascinating journey through Talmud and through the halakhic decisors to figure out where lab-grown meat is in the Torah. And their first assumption is it might be Shimon ben Chalafta. You'll find this in Sanhedrin on page 59b. Shimon ben Chalafta once upon a time was walking down the street. Rav Shimon ben Chalafta, he and I are not on a first name basis. Biggest rabbi of his generation, I'm just me. So Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta is walking down the street, minding his own business, when suddenly he's attacked by lions. Now in America, people snicker at this. You guys are like, oh yeah, that does happen. Like, you guys have stuff that will just, there's a kangaroo came out of nowhere. So he gets attacked by a wild animal. And he does what any certified rabbi should do when attacked by a wild animal. I'm a rabbi, you're God, this is a God problem. I'm not trained in fighting lions. So he turns to God and goes, God, lion, help. And God helps. And two giant pieces of meat descend from heaven and plop in front of him. The lions grab one piece and run away with it and eat it, and they are satisfied. And Shimon ben Chalafta is saved. But Shimon ben Chalafta is also a Jew. And there is a perfectly good piece of meat lying there on the floor. So Shimon ben Chalafta takes this shtick fleish, brings it to the study hall, waves it above his head and says, this fell from heaven from God. Kosher or not kosher? What do you think the kitchen's like up there? Is there mashgiach in heaven? Is this kosher enough for me? And the group in the Jewish study hall gets together. They put their heads together and they announce, nothing impure can come from heaven. So it's automatically kosher. God has good ashgacha up there. Some nudnik in the back of the room, there's always one, raises his hand and says, what if Shimon ben Chalafta had walked in with a donkey that fell from heaven? You're going to say a donkey's kosher? And the base medrash responded back in one voice, didn't we just say everything? Everything. If God sends you a donkey, that's a kosher donkey. God sends you a pig, that's a kosher pig. If it comes from heaven, it is auto-kosher. It doesn't even have a regular status of meat. It's auto-parv, auto-kosher. You don't even have to slaughter it. Anything that comes from heaven is ready to be eaten. That's the rule for heaven meat. So some rabbis looked at this and said, that's our case. We have here meat that was not born and died the normal way. We have magic heaven meat. And the rule is from the Talmud that all magic heaven meat is automatically kosher. Anybody have a problem with that?
This is
This is man-made, not heaven-made.
I heard man-made, not heaven-made. I heard somebody say quite correctly so that this thing was alive and maybe even died. It's just I'm taking a piece of it. This is not the same case. But some people thought maybe it would be. Let's try another one. Can we try another one? Let's give it another try. Another case in Tractate Sanhedrin, 67b. Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yechiel are studying the Sefer Yetzirah. Can anybody tell me why that's so cool? This is the only reference in the Talmud to a Kabbalah book by name. One time in the Talmud references the existence of a Kabbalah book, which tells us that the Sefer Yetzirah is at least 2,000 years old. That's pretty cool, because there are a lot of secular scholars who don't know what they're talking about, who think Kabbalah is a relatively recent invention, but we have the Talmud, which we know is 2,000 years old at least, telling a story of people reading Sefer Yetzirah, and they don't explain what it is because they're dropping that name because everybody knew about it very well by then. We have a tradition that Sefer Yetzirah was written by Abraham, Avram Avinu. This is a very old Kabbalah book, one of the original ones. It's been translated into English, which is probably a bad idea. It holds in it the greatest secrets of the Torah. Let's tell everybody and put it online for free. And in the Sefer Yetzirah, there's instructions. What's Sefer means? Yetzirah means? Creation or formation. What do you think this Kabbalah book teaches you how to do? How to make stuff. Snap your fingers, make a person. Incredible. How to make the world. Important, potent things. How God made the world. Huh?
Sefer Yetzirah written by Adam Rishon.
There's a tradition, Adam a tradition, Avram Avinu, and there's a third one too. Whatever, we're talking old. One of the original books of Kabbalah. Yeah, but the original one, but this would be way before the Zohar. The Zohar was written by Rabbi by Yarchei 2,000 years ago. We're talking now 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years, 5,786 years ago. Old, one of our original Kabbalah books, and you can read it nowadays. It tells you how to make stuff. It says in the Talmud that Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yechiel were one time sitting with Sefer Yetzirah on Erev Shabbos. They would do this every Erev Shabbos, and every Friday they would read this book and make a cow. An iglatilsa, a delicious 3-day-old fatty cow, or 3-month-old. I forget what iglatilsa is. 3-month-old, 3-year-old, 3-day-old. We have a butcher here. We have a sheikh here. Iglatilsa is 3-something. It's a very yummy cow, a very yummy version of cow. They'd make a cow, and they would eat it every Erev Shabbos. Now, gentlemen, I don't know how you help your family get ready for Shabbos every week. But if you're not studying Sefer Yetzirah and producing a cow, you are not the man of the house. This is what a man of the house does. He makes a cow. Women demand better. Send them to the supermarket. Are you kidding me? Jewish men make their own cows. I don't mean shaft them, they make them.
Yeah, but the women have to cook it.
Okay, you bring home the cow you made, she'll cook. If your husband makes a cow, can you agree that you'll cook it? Fair enough. Shots fired from this direction of the Mechitza, gentlemen. They say they'll cook it if you make it. Open Sefer Yetzirah, we want iglatilsa this Shabbos.
He already cooked.
You know what it doesn't say they did in the Talmud? It says they made an iglatilsa and they ate an iglatilsa. You know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say they shechted it. Doesn't say they salted it. Doesn't say they cooked it. They just ate it. You know who notices this? The Pesachei Tshuva in Yeridea, citing the Shlah. The Malbim in Breishis in that place. The Cheshek Shlema on the Shach in Yeridea. Several major halachic authorities notice this and all say in one voice, yeah, because if you make a cow using your own magic human superpowers and not by, mommy cows, if you make your own cow, it's automatically parv and automatically kosher and doesn't need to be shechted or salted. Now, is that closer? Yes. That's closer. That's not from heaven. That's from human effort. Is it our case? Still not. It's a Kabbalah cow. Right, that's a Kabbalah cow. It's still not a lab-grown cow, but it's closer and good effort. Some rabbis tried to hang their hat on that piece of Talmud. After finding that they didn't really match the way we wanted them to, the rabbis all agreed in essentially one voice that we had a better case in the Mishnah and Bechoros, which is a little more boring, but a lot more applicable. The Mishnah and Bechoros tells us that ha-yetzeh mina aser aser yetzeh mina mutter mutter. If you want to know the status of something, ask where it comes from. If something comes from a kosher source, it is kosher. If something comes from a non-kosher source, it is non-kosher. A simple overarching principle in Jewish law that applies to kashrus across the board. And therefore, the OU's final decision, the decision as far as I know of most rabbis, the reason why the OU was looking into this is because they made lab-grown meat in Israel and they wanted to know its kosher status, so the thing does exist now. As far as I know, the major decision for most of the halachic authorities, including the OU, was that it is whatever it comes from, meaning it's fleshig, it's meat, it's not going to be parv, and meaning you would have to shecht and salt and process that cow before isolating the cell you want to make lab-grown meat with. And if you didn't shecht, it'd be treif. It would also mean that if you took a cell from a pig and made lab-grown bacon, that would be non-kosher because it comes from something non-kosher. But this final decision was only after running through several very interesting Gemaras and arriving at a Mishnah that explained it better and was able to actually grasp the severity and the seriousness of the situation. What I hope we've done today, although I know we took a long time, and I know that everybody is weak from fast, especially when I'm now talking about food, what I hope we've done today is establish that the Torah is infinite, that God's wisdom extends to everything that He gave us at Har Sinai, and that is everything, that the Torah is the blueprint for the entire universe, and that when new scientific discoveries come out, this is not a challenge to the Torah, this is an opportunity opportunity for us to look back at our primary texts and demonstrate the greatness of God Almighty. And that the work of Jewish law is part of the work of creating a dwelling place for God in this world, affirming that we believe that God is everywhere and everything. Essentially, when a Jew says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, they may as well be saying, I know where to find lab-grown meat in the Torah. Okay, thank you very much.